Welcome to the Your Pennsylvania Ancestors podcast. In this episode, we talk with Lee Arnold, Chief Operating Officer of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Many genealogy researchers consider the Historical Society of Pennsylvania a must-do archive, and you'll find out why in this episode. Lee shares with us all the various pieces of his collection at the Historical Society and what you can expect when you go to research there. HSP is a special place, and you'll feel like you step back in time when you walk through its doors. I hope you get a little glimpse of that in this episode. I'd love to hear your comments and questions about the episode, so go to www.paancestors.com and click on Leave a Question. There's a little microphone there, and you'll get to leave an audio, and I just might use it on a future episode of the podcast. And now, here's Lee Arnold with the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Lee Arnold, welcome to the podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved at the Historical Society and working there, what your role is? And of course, people always want to know, do you have any ancestors in Pennsylvania?
Those are all really great questions. So I just celebrated my 27th year here at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Of course, I started back in 1992, and I just answered an ad in the newspaper back when there still were newspapers and they still put classified ads in for a library director. And I started off as just being over the books, pamphlets, and serials, a traditional library. And then the position has morphed over the years, where I am now in charge of all the collections at HSP. So all of the books, pamphlets, serials, but all the manuscripts, all the graphics, the archival collections. And we even have a few remaining museum collections, mostly in the form of paintings that are on the wall in our reading room. And then in 2015, I also became the Chief Operating Officer. So I'm in charge of facilities and personnel. So it's a lot of work.
Sounds like it.
It is.
Yeah, because HSP is a big facility. It's got a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot. When you walk in as a researcher, there's multiple layers of information available. And you covered the entire state of Pennsylvania, plus the adjoining states. You do have records from adjoining states, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey.
That's right. So our name belies us a little bit in the sense of our collections really reflect our history and the history as an organization. So in 1892, the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania was formed at HSP, sort of as a Friends of Genealogy group of the Historical Society. And they collected for every state east of the Mississippi River. And we've had some interesting relationships back and forth with GSP since that time. They are a separate organization, and for a long time they were housed in our building. They now have an office in Northeast Philadelphia. But they gave all of their collections to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So for genealogy, we still collect for every state east of the Mississippi River. Now, I am the first Arnold of my branch of Arnolds to ever have set foot in Pennsylvania. But I found my own ancestors in our South Carolina collection. I had an ancestor in the South Carolina militia during the Revolutionary War. And then in our Tennessee collection, I found a land deed. As my ancestors moved from the Carolinas into Tennessee, ultimately into southern Illinois, in northern Illinois, and then southern Wisconsin, where I grew up in southern Wisconsin. So it's an interesting thing. The other thing that shapes our collecting has been in 2002 when we merged with the Balch Institute for Ethnic Studies. The Balch was founded in 1976 as a coast-to-coast, Atlantic to Pacific, documenting ethnic immigrations into the United States. They covered 60 official ethnic groups. Now, when they merged with us, that was a pretty big ambition, Atlantic to Pacific immigration collecting. So we looked at their collections and saw that they were really heavily, the mid-Atlantic, sort of New York down to Virginia. So for when it comes to ethnic immigration documentation, we sort of stick to the mid-Atlantic area. And then for your basic garden variety history, that's more of the Pennsylvania, northern counties of Delaware, South Jersey, that sort of thing.
I had no idea that you had records. I mean, east of the Mississippi was considered in your purview, and that that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, and part of it is, again, our history is that we have very meager acquisition funds, but the funds we have are all endowed, meaning you got to spend them on that. And that's great because it protects us from the marketplace and our general funding. But the quirky thing is that these endowed funds were left to us in people's wills in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're very, very specific. So I have one fund just to only purchase things on North Carolina. So we have a huge North Carolina collection. My joke is, and it's true, but in his will, Mr. Lanier says, I leave you this money in perpetuity to buy books on the state of my birth. So I'm just assuming it's North Carolina as opposed to, buying things about cesarean sections or things like that, or Lamaze methods of birth, that sort of state of his birth. So that's North Carolina. And then we have a fund left to us by Mr. Lamberton to only buy books on Scots-Irish immigration. I have a fund left by Mr. De La Roche to only buy books on French North American history, and it goes on and on like that. So some of our collections, you would be surprised that we have them here, but it's because thoughtful people left us in their wills over 100 years ago.
I am surprised, and I'm laughing to myself because if those men could have foreseen what would be the case in 2019, that the Historical Society of Pennsylvania is swimming in North Carolina, records.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Well, a shout out. I know a researcher out by Pittsburgh who traces family to North Carolina. And
send them over.
Yeah. I'll have to send her over because North Carolina having, so many burned courthouse records from the Civil War. She has been very creative in using state level records. And luckily in Pennsylvania, we don't have that much governmental record loss. But, definitely for people, she's a great presenter because she always gives us creative ways to kind of get around things that we're not finding, in normal places. But back to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, I do want to ask about, for a first-time researcher who's maybe done most of their research on Ancestry or Family Search and worked only with digital records online and typing things into that search box, what can they expect when they come to the Historical Society for the first time?
So one of the things is, I always try to tell people, and we have working relationships with Ancestry.com, Find My Past, and Family Search. So we have good relationships with all three organizations, two of which, Ancestry and Find My Past, are commercial for-profit companies, and FamilySearch.org is a nonprofit. So, however, I do have a beef with Ancestry, which is, one of their lines, you can't watch TV at night without hearing an Ancestry.com commercial. It's like, all you need to do is type. It's like, oh, you need to do a lot more than know how to type. And if you limit your research just to an online database, you really are limiting. Now, what they do is they add spice to it by saying, look, I found all my cousins in Ireland, and I went there, and they treated me, and I had beer, and it was wonderful. Well, all right. I do DNA testing myself. I would never think of putting it out there because I don't want people calling me saying, hey, I'm your cousin. Can I stay with you in Philly? No, you're not going to do that. But the thing is, when they come in the door, we're going to show you real documents that have not been, added to databases. Some have been added to databases, but you're going to go and you look at the originals, but you're mostly going to find items that are going to be new to you, and you're going to be a detective, and you're going to be looking at these things, and you're going to be seeing sometimes the handwriting of your ancestor, and you're going to be finding perhaps some photographs, or you're going to be finding where they lived in the city, and you're going to find an insurance policy for their house. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they had, a lanai back then, or something like that. It's going to be eye-opening. It really is.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful story, and I share your same position about ancestry and the marketing around it.
Yep.
The one that gets me is the woman does DNA testing and she finds out she's related to George Washington. It's just that simple. It's like within 20 minutes. And genealogy is detective work. It is, and it's enjoyable detective work in that you do find, especially at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, things like documents you don't even know exist, like you were saying, insurance policies, genealogy research other researchers did, and their notes are in your closed stacks. And
right. That's right.
I've come across that a couple times researching for clients as well as for myself. And it's, I don't know, there's just something really amazing to find out that there was someone else researching the people you're researching with the care and generosity that they had, did at the time, and you're kind of walking down their same set of tracks.
That's right.
Wonderful. What has been something, I always think an archivist, collection manager, there's no way that they've read through everything in their institution, right? So,
right.
You're discovering along with the patrons, or the researchers. So what's been something that someone discovered that just absolutely floored you? Like you were like, wow, I didn't know we had that, or, that fact existed, for this family, this researcher?
Well, one of the things that I wasn't aware of, and I had a researcher last week asking me to clarify something, and not only could I not clarify it because I never heard of it before, but after 27 years, I'm never embarrassed by saying I did not know that, because what I also sort of tell people is if we have 21 million items here at HSP, and if I knew every item, I would be a genius and probably controlling the world in some sort of James Bond sort of way. So he said to me, what are these things called a Virginia certificate? And I'm like, I never heard of a Virginia certificate. Well, this was part of a land dispute between Virginia, now West Virginia, and Washington County, what is now Washington County, Pennsylvania, about is it in Pennsylvania? Is it in Virginia? That sort of thing. And in order to, you could claim your land, except if someone had an earlier Virginia certificate. So it would say, deed approved pending Virginia certificate. And so this is something that I didn't know, and we had some information about that. And so the researcher and I sort of pieced it together, and he taught me something, and I was able to find a book dealing with some early Virginia land claims in Pennsylvania. Again, a book I didn't know that we had, but based on his query. And so that was something that was really, really good. And then he was able to, he's working on a certain line of his ancestors who were in this border region. So that was something very new to me, and I learned something.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the detective work there, on both your parts, And that brings up a question. So a researcher like that, he came in with a question, what is a Virginia certificate? What should people bring when they come to HSP? What does it look like? What's a good researcher look like when they walk in your door?
Well, a good researcher has a good idea about what they're looking for. I mean, I always get someone coming up to the reference desk, and I do so many hours of reference desk a week. So I want to, A, because we're short-staffed, B, I really want to know what my staff are dealing with on a daily basis. What are the kind of questions? What are the trends? And they'll say, I'm looking for a death certificate. And then I would say, can you narrow that down? 1720, 1820, 1920, last year. I mean, give me an idea of what kind of death certificate you're looking at. Or I'm trying to find, again, they'll say, I'm trying to find my family. And again, I've just met this person. So I'm like, Irish? Are they Italian? Are they African? Tell me what, narrow it down, a little bit. So, you really have to get some basic things, because even though you know your family and you know that you're German or Swiss or something, the reference librarian isn't going to have a clue of what you're sort of looking for and what area you're looking for and the time. So I would say, give me an ethnic group, give me a time frame, and give me a geographic area, and then I can start pointing you in the right direction.
Excellent advice. So really exhaust sort of the records that are available through online research or your own things, and then bring that in. So yeah. the folks at HSP, the staff can get you set in the right direction. So HSP has a couple different layers to it. So it's got is it called the family history room? Is that correct, with the genealogies?
That's right. Yeah, we have about 10,000 published genealogies in the family history room. That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic, and really high quality genealogies. These aren't just there's a few that are names and dates, but a lot of these things are very extensive, well researched, cover broad spans of time and associated families. And in the HSP catalog, they have cataloged in all the surnames within a genealogy. I've noticed even if we'll just use the dreaded surname of Smith, if those Smiths married Wolves, Geigers, whatever, they're also included, which is fantastic. And then you have the Pennsylvania room, and that room is records that are books mostly that people can just pull off the shelf and just look at, in terms of church records, county records. Anything else I'm missing in the Pennsylvania room?
Nope. The family history room, as I said, it has almost primarily published family histories. And some people can say, well, yeah, you have that, but the New York Public Library also has the Johnson family history published in 1920, and family published in 1940. And so what's special about it? A lot of these published family histories are very unique and had limited publishing runs, like maybe 40 copies or something like that, 40 or 50. And so a lot of them aren't around anymore. And again, yes, you might find that there's a library in Kentucky that has one, there's one in Missouri, but we have them all under one roof. So it's a really sort of one-stop shopping. So that's good. Our Pennsylvania room has Pennsylvania and New Jersey materials that are out in the open. Questions to us, we had to sort of lock Delaware up, expand beyond the family history room, and so R through Z is actually around the sides of the Pennsylvania room. And we have two types of things in the Pennsylvania room. We have published books, and then we also have ledgers. These are handwritten, hand-compiled ledgers of local, primarily sectarian records compiled by the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania. So those are all in the open shelves as well.
Oh, excellent. Then you also have a microfilm room.
Yes, and I was just came from our annual general meeting, and one of the statistics I provided our president was that we reshelved 833 microfilm reels last year. People who think, oh, microfilm is dead, everyone uses things online. It's like, well, don't tell that to my staff. We reshelved 800 reels of film last year. So film is still being used. We have a lot of ethnic newspapers on microfilm, thanks to the Balch Institute, and then a lot of microfilm dealing with genealogy, and thanks to the Genealogical Society.
Oh, before I forget, the closed stacks, that's the kind of the part that a researcher does not see.
Yep.
So what is in the closed stacks, and how does someone access that?
Yeah. So our closed stacks actually are the majority of our collections, all the way up to the fourth floor. Part of it's intentional to have separate storage areas, and that was part of our early fireproof remedy plan, so that if each of those areas are enclosed, so that if something happened to one, the rest of the collection would be safe. And those include not only books, but also all manuscript and graphic materials and atlases and things like that. So in order to use those materials, in our online catalog, it'll say closed stacks, and you just have to put down an identifying number. If it's a book, it's a call number plus, the author title, something to give us an idea if there's more than one item in that call number. Or if it's a collection, you would put down, the collection number, and you would say, I want a letter from John Adams from this.
For folks that are new to researching in an archive like yours, yes, the pull slip system it can be for some people a little intimidating.
Yep.
But there is staff there to help. They're incredibly friendly. They're very warm. They're used to newbies, new people coming in, and just ask, questions. They'll let you know if you didn't put enough information down, and, just pick your favorite number seat, whatever your lucky number is that day, and then go ahead. I wanted to mention too, for people, while they're there in that reading room, there is reference books all along the walls of those shelves.
Absolutely.
And they're wonderful, because I know I've discovered all kinds of things that I'm so used to some of those titles being at, any genealogical society, but you have things that I've never seen other places, and it's just fun to walk through and go, look at that, pull it down and look and read it, and learn something new.
And that is of our 4 rooms that are open to the public, our 4 stack areas. So we talked about the family history room, the Pennsylvania room, the microfilm room, but the last one, of course, is our reference room, what we call our reading room. It's a wonderful archaic term, because what I always ask when I get teenagers in, I'm like, what do you think people do in a reading room? And then they'll sheepishly say, read? Yes, they read. And so in our reading room is our reference collection, everything from how-to books, like how to find your Cherokee ancestors, to passenger lists, to the history of areas, general sort of histories of different areas of Pennsylvania or areas that we collect genealogically. We also have, city directories for convenience. Take a look at you can find your ancestor and where they lived and their occupation. So a lot of really good material in those areas. Thank you for
filling out that explanation, because it's to know what people can expect. So when a researcher comes, they definitely should expect to spend a solid chunk of time there. 4 hours is not unreasonable.
Right.
If they can book longer, book longer, so that you can allow, as a researcher, for serendipity and discovery.
Right.
Because you just don't know what you're going to find, or what the staff can recommend to you based on your research. So what percentage of all this 21 million records is digitized? Everyone loves to talk about digital records and things being online. So what's your guess on what's online?
I think it's probably around 15,000 is available online through our digital library. So really just a very, very small percentage of the 21 million.
Okay. So word to word to beginning genealogists, intermediate genealogists, get to your archives. You're
Right.
missing out on the majority of records that have been kept and preserved for research.
Right, and one of the things because we get, sometimes we get high school teachers bringing their students in to acquaint them with original research, and college students, and I say the same thing to both groups of young people. It's like there's a whole world out there beyond your screen. I still talk about a computer screen. I know that young people are now tweeting or twerking or whatever it is they are with their phones, but they think if it's not there, it just doesn't exist. And I think, oh, you're missing out. You are missing out so much on life. It's sort of, I just thought of this right now. It's sort of like, a dating app. If you think that the only people available out there to date or be a future spouse are people, who have this profile online, it's like, well, you might be missing someone else, who goes to your stamp collecting club or your church, or you meet at the dog park when you're walking your dog. You're missing out if you think your life is going to revolve around a screen and the information provided there. For genealogy, that's certainly the case, but in research in general, if you're trying to, find original letters from Indian agents to the Seminole people, it's not going to be online. You're going to have to go into an archive and find it, and it's the same thing in life. You just I always say to kids, put the phone down and look up, and you'll be surprised.
There you go. I think it might be that might be a T-shirt. It might be a slogan we could put on a T-shirt. It was those moments of researching in person in archives that I've made my kind of not just discoveries like, oh, wow, look at that, but really a transformation of understanding like who I am who, like what our country is and like what actually happened. Like it's just, there's just all this detail and everything. So for you, what have you discovered in your 27 years, at HSP and going through records? Like what's been transformational for you?
Well, I think, I was tempted, I think like a lot of people are, and sort of like companies like Ancestry do, with something like you're going to find something really special about yourself, and mine was, my father always said that we had Native American ancestry. I'll cut to the chase. We don't, but that was like, ooh, yes, maybe I was, I was Choctaw or something, ancestor. So, but that's what sort of gets you started, just like, these commercials, like, my ancestor was an Irish fisherman with blue eyes, just like me. And so you think of these things, but what I found was really how wonderfully ordinary I am, in the sense that the history of my family was really the history of this country, where you had people who left Europe for a better life for themselves and a better life for their children. And in my case, my mother's family were German Lutherans who came into northern Wisconsin and lived and sort of established, Lutheran farms, meaning in Lutheran churches. And my mother only spoke German until she went into kindergarten. She didn't speak any English because German was the language of the church in Wisconsin, where she lived, and her family. And then my father, how they were Scots-Irish, and they came into the Carolinas, and they followed that sort of migration, through the Appalachians, keep heading west and things like that. And so, I mentioned that he was in the South Carolina militia, and the only thing it says is that he lost his horse. Now, I grew up on a horse farm, and when I lost my horse, it just meant that the horse got back to the barn before I did, and someone had explained to me, Lee, the horse was shot out from under him. I'm like, oh, that's what you mean, lost his horse. But other than that, these are just, average folk. And there are so many stories like that of average folk, and that's what the fabric of this nation is made up of. And in one sense, I'm very pleased about that. I'm very pleased about that. And one of the things is I do genealogy, and I just sort of looking at these people and thinking, what is the price that they paid so that I could, get a better education, for instance. I'm the first male in my family to graduate from college. I'm also I also ended up in later life, just a few years ago, getting a doctorate degree. Again, something unheard of. My father graduated from the 6th grade and was illiterate most of his life. He came from a family of sharecroppers. So, but if if his ancestors and he didn't work hard and did what they did, I wouldn't have been here to be able to, try to make my life a little better or my life a little easier. So it's a wonderful story, and I'm very appreciative for the price that my ancestors paid to be here.
That's absolutely beautiful. It's so true. It's researching ancestors to look for glory is kind of, or attach yourself to your ancestors' glory or accomplishments. You kind of lose something if that's the intention, and really just looking with open eyes and just seeing who they were and being appreciative of how you got here is a great way to go about it. I really appreciate you sharing that. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you just returned from a trip and and have, I'm sure, a lot to get back to. If you're like everyone, you have a stack of email and people wanting your time. So thank you for sharing what the Historical Society of Pennsylvania is about, what people can expect when they go. Any future changes coming to the Historical Society that you want to make people aware of?
Well, I think I think sometimes just holding steady is an accomplishment.
Yes.
Itself. So if I can at least maintain, we have a very small staff, and as long as we can maintain our current public hours, I think that's an accomplishment. Given sort of the plight of private research libraries today. So that is good. But we have a wonderful partnership with FamilySearch.org, where they have volunteers here scanning our genealogical material, and also, more important, they've also scanned 1 million of our card catalogs. Again, another thing I like surprising teenagers with is, look, it's a card catalog, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. But our 1 million cards, 60% of which are handwritten, are only available in the card catalog. And so our friends at Family Search not only scanned all 1 million cards, but they're in a multi-year process where they're keying them in. So at some point, you'll be able to see, we have a letter from John Adams to Abigail Adams on this date. Now, you still have to come here to look at that letter, but at least you'll know that we actually own that letter. You can look at that knowledge from your living room, whereas right now you actually have to come into HSP, thumb through the card, and say, I'd like to see that letter. So that's one of the things that is happening, which we're really excited about. We'll never throw the cards away. We'll put them in archival boxes. They'll go on a shelf forever. But that's a project that we're very thankful that Family Search is helping us with.
Oh, excellent. So something to look forward to there. And
Indeed.
Yes, and thank you for keeping the ship sailing, so to speak, and keeping it going.
My pleasure.
I for one kind of dislike change in some things, so I'm glad you don't have any big changes coming up.
We're doing okay.
Yeah, so thank you. I'd like to thank Lee for his time this morning and for a really fun conversation about the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. I hope you see, like I do, that it's a really great place to go and do research and find some really special things that you just might not find other places. If you're lost and confused in your Pennsylvania research and just can't find that ancestor, take a couple minutes, leave me an audio question on my website, and I'll answer it on a future episode of the podcast. Go to www.paancestors.com and click on Leave a Question. Thank you for listening, and I'd love it if you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.